Ladies and gentlemen, there is a power that many fear, yet it is the very foundation of greatness. It is a state that many avoid, yet it is the birthplace of vision, clarity, and purpose. That power is being alone. In a world consumed by noise, distractions, and endless social engagements, the ability to embrace solitude has become a lost art. We have been conditioned to believe that being alone is a curse, a sign of weakness, or an indication of failure. But let me submit to you today that being alone is not a weakness. It is a power. It is in the stillness of isolation that destiny is conceived. It is in the quiet moments of solitude that greatness is nurtured. Too often people seek constant companionship because they fear facing themselves. They run from solitude because it forces them to confront their thoughts, their fears, and their true identity. But let me tell you this. Every person who has ever done something significant in this world has had to embrace seasons of being alone. You cannot discover your purpose in a crowd. You cannot hear the whisper of destiny amid the shouts of the world. If you want to be great, you must first master the power of being alone. Being alone is the birthplace of self-discovery. When a person is constantly surrounded by others, they begin to reflect the thoughts, desires, and expectations of the people around them. They take on the identity that society assigns them rather than discovering who they truly are. True self-discovery begins the moment a person learns to embrace being alone. It is in solitude that one is stripped of all external influences, allowing them to confront the deepest questions of their existence. Who am I? Why am I here? What is my purpose? Throughout history, those who made the greatest impact spent seasons of isolation. Before they changed the world, they first had to discover themselves. They had to step away from the noise of the crowd and into the silence of solitude. It is in those moments of quiet reflection that one hears the voice of destiny. Without solitude, a person risks living a life dictated by the expectations of others, rather than their own divine calling. When you are alone, you begin to hear thoughts that were previously drowned out by the opinions of others. You start to recognize your own voice, your own desires, and your own convictions. This is the place where clarity is born. People who never take the time to be alone remain confused about their identity because they have never truly met themselves. They only know the version of themselves that society has created. Being alone also forces a person to confront their fears. Many avoid solitude because they do not want to face the insecurities that lie within them. But the truth is, you cannot conquer what you refuse to confront. When you are alone, you come face to face with your doubts, your weaknesses, and your fears. And it is in that confrontation that you find the power to overcome. Self-discovery is the foundation of purpose. A person who does not know who they are will never know what they were created to do. That is why being alone is not just a privilege, it is a necessity. Until a person learns to be alone, they will never truly understand the unique assignment placed upon their life. They will continue to follow the path laid out by others, never stepping into their true calling. So if you ever find yourself alone, do not run from it. Do not fill the silence with distractions. Instead, embrace it. Use that time to discover yourself. Because the moment you find yourself, you find your purpose. And when you find your purpose, you find your power. Separation precedes elevation. The greatest transformations in life happen in seasons of separation. Every major breakthrough, every significant elevation is preceded by a moment of solitude. Look at nature. Before a seed becomes a tree, it must first be buried alone in the darkness of the soil. Before an eagle soars, it must first leave the comfort of the nest. Before a person steps into their destiny, they must first embrace a season of separation. Many people resist separation because they fear losing relationships, opportunities, or familiar environments. But what they fail to understand is that separation is necessary for growth. You cannot rise to the next level while clinging to the comfort of where you are. Sometimes you have to step away from the crowd to hear the voice of destiny calling you to something greater. Separation is often uncomfortable because it requires letting go of what is familiar. It demands leaving behind the distractions and influences that have shaped your current reality. But what you must understand is that every great person has had to go through this process. Moses had to leave Egypt before he could lead a nation. Jesus had to go into the wilderness before he began his ministry. Every visionary, every leader, every world changer had to experience a season where they were set apart. When you embrace separation, you position yourself for revelation. You begin to see things from a different perspective. Your mind becomes clear, your spirit becomes sensitive, and your vision becomes sharper. The distractions that once clouded your purpose are removed, and you begin to understand the direction you need to take. Separation is also a test. It reveals who is truly committed to growth and who is only interested in comfort. Many want the rewards of greatness without the cost of separation. But the truth is, you cannot rise to the next level while holding on to the past. You must be willing to walk away from anything that hinders your progress. So if you find yourself in a season of separation, do not fight it, do not resist it, embrace it. Because separation is not rejection, it is preparation. And when you allow yourself to be set apart, you position yourself for the elevation that is coming next. Solitude is the school of wisdom. Wisdom is not found in noise, it is found in stillness. The greatest lessons of life are not taught in crowds, but in moments of solitude. Many seek knowledge from others, but true wisdom comes from within. It is cultivated in the quiet moments when there are no distractions, no voices competing for attention, and no external influences shaping decisions. If a person desires to walk in wisdom, they must first learn to embrace solitude. Every great thinker, philosopher, and leader has had to separate themselves from the world to gain insight. Moses received divine instructions in the solitude of the mountain. Jesus often withdrew from the crowds to pray alone. The greatest ideas, the most revolutionary concepts, and the deepest revelations are birthed in isolation. Wisdom is the result of reflection, and reflection requires silence. Most people fail to acquire wisdom because they are too busy talking to others instead of listening to themselves. They fill their days with conversations, social interactions, and entertainment, leaving no room for deep thought. But wisdom does not shout, it whispers, and only those who are willing to be still can hear its voice. A person who never spends time alone will always be dependent on the opinions of others, rather than developing the discernment to think for themselves. Solitude teaches a person to think critically, to analyze situations deeply, and to develop a perspective that is not influenced by popular opinion. The world today is filled with people who simply repeat what they hear without ever pausing to think for themselves. They do not question, they do not reflect, and as a result, they lack true wisdom. The person who values solitude, however, learns to process information on a deeper level, gaining insights that others miss. Wisdom also requires self-examination. In solitude, a person is forced to evaluate their own actions, beliefs, and decisions. They begin to recognize their weaknesses, their strengths, and the areas that need growth. This level of introspection leads to transformation. When a person continuously examines their life in solitude, they refine their character, strengthen their values, and develop a deeper understanding of their purpose. Therefore, if a person desires to be wise, they must first learn to be alone. They must value the moments of silence, seek the lessons that solitude offers, and use them to build a foundation of wisdom that will guide them through life. Because wisdom is not given to the loudest voice in the room. It is given to the one who knows how to listen in the quiet. Isolation is the laboratory of creativity. Every invention, every artistic masterpiece, and every great innovation was conceived in solitude. Creativity is not birthed in the midst of distractions, but in the stillness of an undisturbed mind. The most creative individuals in history were those who knew how to retreat from the world, shutting out the noise to allow their imagination to flourish. When a person is constantly engaged with others, their mind is occupied with external conversations, societal expectations, and the immediate demands of life. But when they step away from these distractions, their mind begins to explore new possibilities. It is in the moments of isolation that ideas are refined, concepts are developed, and visions become clear. Creativity requires deep thought, and deep thought requires solitude. Many people complain that they lack creativity, but the truth is, they have never given themselves the space to think creatively. They are too busy consuming content rather than creating it. But when a person embraces solitude, their mind becomes free to imagine, to dream, and to innovate. Isolation also provides the time necessary for mastery. Every great writer, artist, musician, and scientist has spent countless hours alone, perfecting their craft. They understand that creativity is not an accident. It is a discipline. It requires dedication, focus, and an environment where the mind can work without interruption. Those who fear solitude will never reach their full creative potential because creativity demands the patience to sit alone with one's thoughts until something extraordinary is produced. Many of the world's greatest breakthroughs were discovered in isolation. Isaac Newton formulated the laws of motion and gravity in solitude. Nikola Tesla's most brilliant ideas were developed when he withdrew from the distractions of society. Even today, the most innovative minds intentionally set aside time to be alone because they know that creativity thrives in isolation. If a person desires to be truly creative, they must learn to love solitude. They must cultivate an environment where their mind can wander freely, their ideas can take shape, and their imagination can run wild. Because the most powerful creations are not born in noise. They are born in the silence of solitude. Mastering loneliness leads to mastering life. One of the greatest challenges people face is loneliness. They fear being alone, believing that solitude is a sign of rejection or failure. But let me tell you this: loneliness is not your enemy, it is your teacher. The person who learns to master loneliness masters life. Because loneliness is not about the absence of people, it is about the absence of purpose. When a person has discovered their purpose, they can be alone and still be fulfilled. Many people feel lonely, even in the midst of crowds. They surround themselves with others, yet there is still an emptiness within them. This is because true fulfillment does not come from external connections. It comes from internal wholeness. A person who has not learned to be whole within themselves will always seek validation from others. They will depend on relationships, social activities, and external achievements to fill the void inside. But the truth is, no amount of social interaction can substitute for personal fulfillment. Mastering loneliness begins with shifting perspective. Instead of seeing solitude as a burden, one must see it as an opportunity. Solitude is the place where self-love is cultivated. It is where a person learns to enjoy their own company, to appreciate their own thoughts, and to embrace their own uniqueness. When a person reaches the point where they no longer fear being alone, they have reached a level of strength that few ever attain. Loneliness is also the testing ground for emotional stability. Many people struggle with their emotions because they have never taken the time to sit with them, process them, and understand them. Instead, they keep themselves busy, avoiding the silence that forces them to confront what is truly going on inside. But a person who has learned to be alone has learned to master their emotions. They do not allow loneliness to control them. Instead, they use it as a tool for personal growth. The most powerful individuals are those who have become independent of the need for constant companionship. This does not mean they do not value relationships. It means they do not depend on them for happiness. They have discovered that true fulfillment comes from within. They do not need external validation because they have already validated themselves. They do not need constant affirmation because they are secure in who they are. So if you find yourself in a season of loneliness, do not fight it, embrace it. Use it to discover yourself, to strengthen yourself, and to build a foundation of inner stability. Because the moment you master loneliness, you master life. And a person who has mastered life is unstoppable. Ladies and gentlemen, what I have shared with you today is a truth that many ignore. Being alone is not a weakness. It is a power. In a world that glorifies constant activity, endless social interaction, and external validation, the ability to embrace solitude has become rare. But the truth is, the greatest breakthroughs, the deepest wisdom, and the most powerful transformations happen in the silence of solitude. It is in solitude that you discover yourself. It is in separation that you are prepared for elevation. It is in stillness that wisdom is cultivated. It is in isolation that creativity is birthed. It is in loneliness that true strength is revealed. And it is in mastering loneliness that a person gains mastery over life itself. The world may try to convince you that being alone is something to be feared. It may tell you that solitude is a sign of failure. But the truth is, solitude is where greatness is born. Every person who has ever changed the world first had to learn the power of being alone. So I challenge you today, do not fear solitude. Do not run from being alone. Instead, embrace it, use it, grow in it. Because when you master the power of being alone, you unlock the greatest power of all, the power to fulfill your destiny.